in terms of all of these issues, I think that we got to make a very important distinction of the people online. Their goal is not necessarily to come to a solution. Their goal is to like elevate their own stature and
That's true.
and
I got likes.
prominence.
Look at I dunked on James Lee today on that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's their goal. And then so we have to look at, okay, for the people involved in this conflict, like what are they hoping for? Yeah. And it's different. That's where it's coming from as far as all of these issues, is that like, if you take the COVID one, right? It's like, well, it seems to me that this vaccine probably is doing some good stuff. There seems to be a few side effects, and there seems to be something weird going on with how the clinical trials are done and this and that. And then it's like, some people really value like, hey, I want to be 100% sure before we take this. Other people are like, no, it's for the greater good. Like, this is how it's done. And so then and then people start shaming each other and that kind of thing. I think the hate just leads to more hate. You're just escalating the amount of hate. Whereas like, I think the approach that I always try to take is like trying to be like outlining, okay, here's like the outcome. And probably this is, the likely outcome if you go down this path. Are you comfortable with this? If they're comfortable with it, I can't even argue with them. It's like, okay, well, then that's kind of the path that we're going down. But I'm trying to get everybody to, like, that's my personal goal, is to get everybody to be like really comfortable with what they feel. And like really own it,
Is that kind of, and maybe you can explain a little bit about your channel 5149. Where is now? I'm gonna guess.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna see how close I am.
Okay.
I think 5149. It's percentages of how you approach issues. You are 51% one way, but you're open to the 49% of the other side of an issue. Am I anywhere near?
The beauty of this is that you're able to interpret this however you want. But I can tell you the genesis of the story, because it is actually kind of a nickname that a good friend of mine gave to me, because he's like, just observing my behavior in the wild. And you're like, dude, you're saying some stuff like, I'm pretty sure like 51% of the people are fine and totally agree with that. And then 49% will find it extremely offensive what you're saying. So that's kind of where it got started. But there's a whole, like, since I've been doing it, it's taken on different meanings for me. Like, for example, what I strive for, let's try to find, if we're living in a democracy, like, let's try to find a 51% solution. Like, that should be what we're looking for, right? It's very, very pragmatic in a way of like, let's try to find something that's going to work for the most number of people. Or there's actually an emotional component to 5149 as far as like a love, like, hey, I'm going to give 51% and then only expect the 49. So I'm always going to give more than the other 1% person.
More. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different meanings. I think that the original one came from that, and then it's just kind of taken on and some different things. And I think that's the beauty of something symbolic like that. And the funny story is that, like, I have a tattoo of that on my arm, and then I went to Europe. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. And I met a couple of Italian guys, and we kind of hit it off. And they're like, I was telling them about the 5149 idea. This is way before I even started any YouTube channels or anything like that. And they're like, man, we love that idea. And I saw them again the next year, and they had the same tattoo on them.
Oh, that's rad.
Which is
hey, there's 5149. Look at us. We got that tattoo. That's so cool, man. Yeah, and if it's like you can live life 5149, I like that. And that's kind of like, if everybody likes you or everybody hates you, you're probably doing something wrong. But if 51% of people agree with you and 49% hate you, yeah, maybe you're kind of in the right zone. Or I don't know if that's necessarily the analogy, but yeah, that 5149 lifestyle, I like that.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm trying to just tell what I think is going on, which is ultimately going to upset people, because I don't like being boxed into, say, like, that's why when people try to label my politics, I always reject any label. They're like, oh, you're a leftist, or I've been called anything from a leftist all the way to being an alt-right, fascist, pipeline. So I'm like, how can those two?
Yeah, right.
at the same time.
Fascist. It's like, what?
Yeah. So that's what I've so like when something's going on, when the labeling is that wide of a dispersion, that means that these labels don't really mean anything. So then so my take is like, I'm always going to try to figure out what the input and the output of things are, and then hopefully then you can make up your mind to say, okay, is that good? Because I was not to, because this is kind of top of mind. I'm about to do a video on this on TikTok, but talking about like Israel, Palestine. It's like, if you think about it compared to America, like we exterminated a lot of Native Americans here. And you can make the argument that it was good for the United States. We had to do it because if we had those guys out there doing their own tribes, it would cause a lot of societal turmoil. There might be skirmishes and things like that doesn't exist right now because we wiped them out. So you know, 100 years later, 200 years later, we don't have this kind of we don't have that problem at the moment. So from some certain perspective, like that's an outcome that's desirable. Now, it killed like millions and millions of people to get this outcome. So I try not to be like, well, you're a horrible person. I was like, well, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know how you view that kind of thing, but that's just where I am in terms of looking at something like that. It's not black and white, like you said. It's from one perspective, this is how they feel. From another, this is how they feel.
Well, it's always remember, you are not alone. Catch full episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.